Screenwriting is filled with jargon that you need to know if you want to discuss your screenplay with producers, creatives, and peers. And that jargon gets especially confusing when the same word has different meanings in different contexts, and even some ambiguity within those. Like our worst offender, the beat. In screenwriting, there are at least 3 different kinds of beats: story beats, action beats, and pause beats. Or at least those are the names I'm giving them to help explain their differences. In a screenplay, a story beat is a moment in your story that moves the narrative forward. For example, it might create a point of no return that forces the plot to advance. Marty tries to escape the Libyans in the DeLorean, inadvertently activating the time machine and sending him back to 1955. Or prepare the characters for the next stage of their story. The council argues over who should take the ring until Frodo volunteers. His companions, Legolas, Gimli, and Boromir all agree to aid him, forming the Fellowship of the Ring. Or even reveal a twist that turns the whole narrative on its head. Falling asleep, a ring falls from Anna's hand, and Malcolm realizes it's his own wedding ring, revealing the twist. He's been dead the whole time. Some writers consider these beats synonymous with plot points, but others reserve that term for only major events that change the direction of the story, like you'll find in the 7-point story structure. Others still flip this dynamic and reserve the term beat for the turning points of the story, most famously seen in the ever-popular Snyder beat sheet from Save the Cat. Whether you only consider the major turning points or every moment that drives your story forward, a beat sheet is a document that lists all of these key events in your story, breaking the plot down into its simplest form. These can be useful for outlining a story before diving into the script itself, because it's always easier to make changes from this broader point of view than to a full 100-page screenplay. In this same way, creating a beat sheet for a completed draft can give you a better idea of what is and isn't working, and will allow you to easily manipulate the arrangement and make changes to your story without rewriting full sequences. Beat sheets are also sometimes requested when pitching a project, and can be a helpful deliverable when writing on assignment to make sure your vision for the story aligns with the producer before you spend too much time writing the actual script. While a big picture view of your screenplay can be helpful, stories eventually need to be fleshed out into the scripts we know and love. Most commonly, this means breaking them down into acts. Within each act are sequences, within sequences scenes, and within scenes, we get to another sort of beat that you'll sometimes hear called an action beat. While we're going to be focusing on action beats here, I'll actually be covering acts, plot points, beat sheets, and much more in a future series on story structure, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, I thought I understood so-called action beats pretty well before I started my research for this video, but the more I read and watched, the more confused I became, until I finally realized there just wasn't a good agreed upon definition for an action beat. The most common definition you'll run across is that an action beat is the smallest unit of action in a script. But then, what exactly is action? Action can be defined as something done or performed. So the forward kicks the ball and the goalie dives for it is 2 actions. But if that's what we meant, we could just call them, well, actions. Okay, well, in screenwriting, action is often used as a catch-all term for the element of screenplays that describes what we see on screen. But I prefer the term narrative description because it actually contains descriptions of actions and characters and setting. But even if we do call all of that action, how do we measure the smallest unit of it? And doesn't a beat need to include dialogue as well if it's going to actually be useful as a framework for discussing your scene, which is kind of the whole point? And then it all clicked. While referencing screenplay writing the picture, I came across this definition. A beat is a small section of dialogue or behavior that's accented by a particular emotion, subject, and/or action. Meaning anytime there's a change in that emotion, subject, or action, there's a new beat. Jack tosses the bloody medallion to someone behind Barbossa. This is a break from the fighting between Jack and Barbossa, and a shift of focus to the medallion, a change in action and subject. You could argue it's still part of the fight, but the medallion is what contrasts this moment from its surrounding moments. It accents the section. Barbossa turns and draws his pistol on Elizabeth. A shot rings out. Back to fighting, or still fighting depending on your perspective, but it's guns this time, and it brings Elizabeth into the danger zone, which contrasts this fighting with the rest. Jack holds his smoking pistol, still aimed at Barbossa.
10 years you carry that pistol, now you waste your shot.
A reveal is always a new beat because it's inherently a contrasting subject. We think we're watching Barbossa shoot Elizabeth until we realize we're actually watching Jack shoot Barbossa with his special bullet.
He didn't waste it.
Will stands over the Aztec chest holding a bloody sword, his left hand in a fist. He opens the fist. The medallions, blood covering them, drop from his hand, revealing the cut in his palm. Fighting's over, and another twist. It was Will that caught the medallion, and now it's breaking curses time. New action, new subject. Barbossa looks down at his chest. Blood blossoms on his shirt around the bullet hole. His face registers pain for the first time in years. Barbossa's confidence has turned to fear, pain, and confusion. He's dying. Is death a new action? Subject? Both? Regardless, it's definitely a new beat. These accented sections can be singular actions, complete paragraphs or lines of dialogue, or even span multiple paragraphs or elements. But each one needs to motivate the next beat of the story. Jack throws the medallion over Barbossa. Barbossa turns and draws his gun on the first person he sees. Jack stops Barbossa by shooting him first. But that only works if Will breaks the curse, which leads to Barbossa's death. But just how small can a beat actually be? We already mentioned action beats that are only a single literal action, but what about the absence of action? Well, that's where pause beats come in. When a beat is explicitly written into the action or dialogue, it indicates a pause or an absence of action.
Pay attention. It's not your MJ, Peter, okay?
A beat.
I'm sorry, I'll be right back.
In this use, the term beat likely comes from theater, who may have borrowed it from music. And it certainly still plays a rhythm role in our screenplays, with some writers even using terms like 2 beats or a half a beat to really hone in on the timing.
Kurt, do you care about anyone other than yourself? Just find some other girl to fucking jack off to and do nothing about.
Hurt, PJ takes this in. Josie immediately looks regretful. After a couple of beats,
Yeah, I will.
PJ heads out of the gym, fuming. But I prefer to think about it as the absence of action to help differentiate it from a pause. Pausing, he surveys the area ahead, sees something odd on the ground. Pausing is an action a character takes. It's more of an intentional hesitation. While a beat is more purely timing.
You see, Sterling, you keep thinking I'm trying to convict you. I'm not a cop. And a wise man once told me, you want to hurt someone, you hit them where it hurts.
Beat.
I didn't send the recording to the cops.
It's an empty space that separates lines of dialogue or action. Though that empty space can certainly be, and often is, filled by context that adds meaning to the moment. That said, you can usually achieve a similar effect without using screenwriting jargon like beat that reminds the reader of the medium and risks breaking any immersion you've worked so hard to create. Not to mention, explicitly writing beats into your script is a surprisingly common pet peeve among readers. They're still seen often enough that it really shouldn't be an issue, but if you want to create a more natural read with a more impactful break, try replacing the beat with a small relevant action.
But nothing could possibly matter more than this conversation we're having right now concerning the fate of every single world of our infinite multiverse. Where's the respect for elders?
Caresses her.
My dear Evelyn, I know you. With every passing moment, you feel you might have missed your chance to make something of your life.
If you're looking for even more tools to control the rhythm and pacing of your dialogue and action, then you should check out this video on dashes and ellipses to learn the uses of and the differences between these often confused punctuation marks.